Mason, Zero Day by Byron. Avant Part 1. The algorithm Chapter 1. Chandler Mason had been staring at the same line of code for 20 minutes when he noticed something that would change everything. It was 11:47 p.m. on his fifth night at the National Security Agency's Fort Meade facility, and he was beginning to think that accepting this job had been a colossal mistake. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the nearly empty operations center, and his eyes burned from hours of monitoring network traffic logs that all looked exactly the same. Endless streams of encrypted data packets flowing through Department of Defense servers like digital blood through electronic veins. Until this one. Chandler leaned closer to his monitor, his 23-year-old face reflecting green in the glow. The data packet wasn't following standard routing protocols. It had bounced through 7 different relay points, all within secure government networks, before arriving at what should have been its first stop. "That's weird," he muttered, pulling up the packet's metadata. "What's weird?" Chandler jumped. He'd forgotten that Mike Patterson, his supervisor, was still in the building. The gray-haired veteran analyst appeared behind him, coffee mug in hand, looking more alert at midnight than Chandler felt after 2 energy drinks. "Probably nothing," Chandler said quickly. "Just a routing anomaly. I'm sure it's..." "Show me." Patterson's tone had changed. The casual Friday night friendliness evaporated, replaced by something sharp and focused. Chandler highlighted the suspicious packet and traced its path across the network map. Patterson's jaw tightened. "How long has this been happening?" "I just noticed it. Maybe 30 seconds ago." "No." Patterson leaned over Chandler's shoulder, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "How long has this been happening?" A new window opened. Dozens of similar packets, all following the same bizarre routing pattern, all time-stamped within the last 6 hours. Then hundreds, then thousands. "Jesus Christ, Patterson whispered. He grabbed his phone. "This is Patterson. Wake up, Director Carmichael. We have a situation." Chandler's heart hammered against his ribs. 5 days. He'd been on the job for 5 goddamn days, and he'd somehow stumbled into something that made his supervisor look genuinely frightened. "Sir, what is this?" Patterson ignored him, speaking rapidly into the phone. "Unauthorized network traversal across multiple secure systems. Sophisticated routing algorithm designed to avoid detection protocols. It's active right now." He hung up and turned to Chandler. "You're about to get a crash course in crisis management, kid. Don't touch anything. Don't close anything. And whatever you do, don't try to trace those packets back to their origin point." "Why not?" "Because if someone's using this kind of routing sophistication, they've set up tripwires. The moment we start actively investigating, they'll know we're onto them." 3 minutes later, the operations center transformed from a quiet tomb into controlled chaos. Director Sarah Carmichael arrived first, a severe woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She was followed by a team of senior analysts Chandler had only seen in orientation photos. "Walk me through it," Carmichael ordered, her voice cutting through the sudden activity. Chandler's mouth went dry, but Patterson nodded at him. "You found it. You explain it." So Chandler did, his voice steadier than he felt. He explained the anomalous routing, the pattern recognition that had caught his attention, the sheer volume of traffic once you knew what to look for. Carmichael listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. "Good eye," she said finally. "Patterson, isolate the algorithm. I want to know what it's doing and where it came from." "Mason, you're with me." Chandler blinked. "Me? You found it. You're the only one who's been looking at it with fresh eyes. Everyone else has been staring at these networks so long they've stopped seeing the forest for the trees." She was already walking toward a secure conference room. "Move." The next hour passed in a blur. Chandler sat in a room that he was pretty sure required a clearance level he didn't have, watching as the full scope of the intrusion emerged. The algorithm wasn't just moving through their networks, it was mapping them, learning their structure, identifying their weaknesses, cataloging their defenses. "It's reconnaissance," said James Rivera, the agency's lead cyber threat analyst. "Whoever deployed this is preparing for something bigger." How long until they have what they need? Carmichael asked. Chen's fingers danced across his tablet. Based on the data collection rate? 72 hours. Maybe less. Options. We could shut it down, Patterson suggested. Purge the algorithm from our systems. And tip them off that we know, Carmichael countered. They'd scatter, and we'd lose any chance of identifying them. She turned to Chandler. You said you could map the origin point without triggering their defenses? Chandler hesitated. I said I might be able to. The algorithm uses a randomization pattern for its routing, but randomization in computing is never truly random. There's always a seed value, a starting point. If I can identify the mathematical pattern underlying the randomization, how long? Hours? Days? I don't know. I've never done anything like this before. Carmichael smiled, and it wasn't reassuring. Then I guess you're about to learn. You've got 24 hours. Find me whoever deployed this algorithm. Chapter 2. Chandler didn't go home that night. He didn't go home the next night either. The NSA set him up in a secure workstation with access to tools he'd only read about in classified briefings. Patterson brought him food at irregular intervals and coffee by the gallon. The rest of the world ceased to exist. There was only the algorithm, the data, and the pattern he knew had to be there. The problem was elegance. Whoever had designed this algorithm was brilliant, maybe brilliant enough to avoid the mathematical fingerprints that usually gave away a piece of code's creator. The randomization was sophisticated, built on quantum probability functions that should have been impossible to predict. Should have been. But Chandler had written his master's thesis on quantum computing vulnerabilities. He'd spent 18 months exploring the theoretical weak points in quantum encryption, the places where the elegance of quantum mechanics brushed up against the messy reality of actual hardware implementation. At 3:47 a.m. on his second sleepless night, he found it. Patterson. His voice cracked from disuse. Patterson, I've got something. His supervisor appeared within seconds, Rivera right behind him. Chandler pointed at his screen, where lines of code scrolled past in cascading green text. The quantum randomization isn't perfect. It's based on a pseudo-random number generator seeded with hardware-specific data, probably the unique identifier of whatever quantum processor generated it. But quantum processors have manufacturing tolerances, microscopic imperfections that create a signature in the random numbers they produce. English, Mason, Rivera said, but he was leaning forward, interested. Every quantum processor has a fingerprint. I can't tell you who deployed the algorithm, but I can tell you what specific hardware they used to create it. And there are only 12 operational quantum processors in the world with the sophistication to generate this kind of algorithm. Patterson and Rivera exchanged glances. 12. Chandler pulled up a map. 12 red dots appeared, scattered across the globe. 6 in the United States, 2 in Europe, 2 in China, 1 in Russia, 1 in Israel. These are the locations of every quantum research facility with the hardware capability to create this algorithm. But here's the interesting part. He highlighted a cluster of data points. The algorithm's signature matches manufacturing tolerances consistent with processors built by Teradyne Industries, a defense contractor based in Virginia. And of the 12 facilities, only 6 used Teradyne processors. All 6 dots were in the United States. The room fell silent. You're saying this is domestic? Patterson's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying whoever did this had access to some of the most secure quantum computing facilities in America, Chandler replied. And based on the timestamp data, they deployed the algorithm from at least 3 different locations simultaneously. Rivera was already on his phone. Director Carmichael needs to see this. Now. 20 minutes later, Chandler found himself briefing a room full of people who terrified him. Director Carmichael had brought in the Deputy Director of National Intelligence, the head of FBI Cyber Division, and a grim-faced woman from the Department of Defense who introduced herself only as Colonel Reeves. Chandler explained his findings, projecting his analysis onto the conference room's wall-sized screen. When he finished, no one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Colonel Reeves broke the silence. You're telling me we have a coordinated cyber attack originating from inside our own secure facilities, using our own quantum computing infrastructure, and we have no idea who's behind it? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Chandler said, surprised by his own boldness. But there's more. I started analyzing the algorithm's behavior patterns across the network. It's not just collecting information, it's looking for something specific. He pulled up a new visualization. The algorithm spends disproportionate time probing 3 types of systems. First, command and control networks for our ICBM launch facilities. Second, our military satellite uplink stations. And third, he hesitated. And third, the deputy director prompted, the State Department's encrypted communications network, specifically, communications related to diplomatic relations with China. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Are you suggesting, Colonel Reeves said carefully, that someone is planning to launch a nuclear strike against China and frame the United States for it? I'm not suggesting anything, Chandler said. I'm just telling you what the algorithm is looking for. Carmichael stood. We need to assume worst-case scenario. If someone with access to our most secure facilities is planning an attack sophisticated enough to require this level of reconnaissance, we're not dealing with lone wolves or opportunistic hackers. This is organized, well-funded, and has been in planning for months, maybe years. Sleeper cells, the FBI director said quietly. You're talking about sleeper cells embedded in our own government. I'm talking about identifying every person who had physical access to those 6 quantum facilities in the last 6 months, and finding out which ones aren't who they claim to be, Carmichael replied. Mason, can you determine when the algorithm was first deployed? Chandler nodded, already typing. Give me a few minutes. Those few minutes stretched into an hour as he traced the algorithm's ghost signatures backward through archived network logs. The oldest traces were faint, corrupted by time and data compression, but they were there. 8 months, he announced finally. The first iteration of this algorithm appeared in our networks 8 months ago. It's been evolving, learning, adapting ever since. 8 months, Colonel Reeves repeated. That's impossible. Our security protocols would have detected it. Unless it was designed by someone who knew exactly how those security protocols work, Chandler said. Someone who could code the algorithm to be invisible to the very defenses they helped create. The implications hung in the air like a poison gas. Director Carmichael's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. Turn on CNN. Now. Someone fumbled for a remote. The conference room's secondary screen flickered to life, showing a breaking news banner. Drone strike kills Undersecretary of Defense in Georgetown. The news anchor's voice was shaken. Apparent assassination of Undersecretary James Holloway outside his home this morning. Military officials are investigating how an armed drone penetrated Washington, D.C.'s restricted airspace without being detected. 3 Secret Service agents were also killed in the attack. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Carmichael turned to Colonel Reeves. Was Holloway one of yours? The colonel's expression was stone. He oversaw our nuclear command and control modernization program. He would have had intimate knowledge of every system the algorithm has been probing. Then he wasn't the target, Rivera said, his face gray. He was the loose end. Another phone buzzed, then another. The room erupted into controlled panic as multiple notifications arrived simultaneously. Chandler watched as the color drained from every face in the room. What? He asked. What's happening? Patterson turned his laptop around. On the screen, 6 different news alerts. Senator Patricia Vaughn killed in car explosion. Washington, D.C. Admiral Marcus Stone found dead in apparent suicide. Arlington, Virginia. State Department Chief of Staff Maria Castellano killed in home invasion. Bethesda, Maryland Defense Intelligence Agency Director Robert Kane critically injured in drone strike. Alexandria, Virginia General Howard Rice killed in helicopter crash. Quantico, Virginia FBI Deputy Director Thomas Brennan assassinated outside FBI headquarters. Washington, D.C. 6 high-level officials. 6 different methods. all within a 3-hour window. This is it, Carmichael said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Whatever they're planning, they're making their move. These weren't random targets. Every single one of these people had oversight over critical national security systems. They're removing anyone who might be able to stop them. Colonel Reeves was on her phone. I need immediate security details on every cabinet member and joint chief. Full lockdown. Authorization code Reeves Delta 79. She hung up and turned to the room. We're at DEFCON 3 as of now. Everyone in this room is hereby under federal protection until this is resolved. Director, Rivera called out. I'm getting alerts from the algorithm. It's changing behavior. Everyone crowded around his screen. The algorithm had stopped its stealthy reconnaissance pattern. Now it was moving aggressively, burrowing into systems it had previously only observed, exploiting vulnerabilities it had spent months cataloging. It's taking control, Rivera said, his voice tight, of everything. Chandler watched in horror as the algorithm spread like a digital cancer through the defense networks. Command and control systems, satellite uplinks, launch protocols. Everything they'd spent months learning, they were now attacking. How long until we lose critical systems? Carmichael demanded. We've already lost some, Rivera replied. Communication networks are down. Military satellite control is compromised. And he stopped, his face going pale. Oh God, what? They're in the nuclear command network. Not just observing, actually in it. Colonel Reeves grabbed her phone again. I need Stratcom on the line. Now, tell them we have a potential nuclear. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in after 2 seconds that felt like hours, bathing the room in eerie red. Backup generators hummed to life, but half the screens remained dark. That shouldn't be possible, someone said. This building has redundant power systems. They're not just attacking our defense networks, Chandler said, his mind racing. They're attacking our infrastructure, power grids, communications, everything. They want us blind and helpless. Patterson's laptop was still running on battery power. He pulled up a news feed, though the internet connection was spotty. It's not just us. Power outages reported across the eastern seaboard. Communications disruptions nationwide. This is coordinated. Carmichael's face was grim. How many? Ma'am. You said the algorithm originated from multiple facilities simultaneously. How many sleeper cells are we dealing with? Chandler pulled up his analysis on his own battery-powered laptop. Based on the synchronization patterns and the geographic distribution of the initial deployments. 12 separate cells, all activated at the same time. 12 cells, Carmichael repeated. Do we know where they are? Not yet, but they all need to maintain connection to the algorithm they deployed. I might be able to trace their current locations by mapping the control signals. Do it, Colonel Reeves ordered. I don't care if it tips them off at this point. They're already making their move. I need to know where to send my people. Chandler's fingers flew across the keyboard. The algorithm was designed to hide its controllers, but now that it was actively attacking rather than just observing, it needed constant input. That input created a signal he could follow. Got something, he said after 10 minutes of frantic work. Active control signals originating from. Holy shit. What? He turned the laptop around. 12 red dots on a map of Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. But these weren't random locations. These were Pentagon 2 signals State Department, 2 signals NSA Fort Meade, 1 signal CIA headquarters. Langley 2 signals Department of Defense, 1 signal Stratcom Alternate Command Center, 1 signal Naval Research Laboratory, 2 signals Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency 1 signal. They're all in our buildings, Patterson whispered. The controllers are inside our own facilities. Not just in the buildings, Rivera added, his voice hollow. Look at the signal strength and location precision. These aren't people who broke in. These are people with offices, with access badges, with security clearances. The realization settled over the room like a shroud. "We've been infiltrated," Carmichael said quietly. "At the highest levels across multiple agencies. This isn't a cyber attack. This is a coup." Colonel Reeves was already moving. "I need tactical teams at every one of those locations. Full sweep. Detain everyone who can't prove they're supposed to be there. And someone find out what the hell they're actually trying to do with our nuclear systems." "I can tell you that," Chandler said. Everyone turned to look at him. He pulled up a new analysis, his hands shaking. "The algorithm isn't trying to launch our missiles from our facilities. That would be too hard to pull off. There are too many safeguards, too many fail-safes. But they're accessing our launch codes, our authentication protocols, everything they'd need to spoof a launch order." "To what end?" the deputy director asked. Chandler swallowed hard. "To make it look like we're the ones who launched, while they launch from somewhere else." Chapter 3. The next 12 hours were the longest of Chandler Mason's life. While tactical teams raced to the 12 identified locations, Chandler and his team worked frantically to understand the full scope of the plot. The algorithm had infected systems they were still discovering, spread through networks they hadn't even known were connected. At 4:17 a.m., they got their first capture. "FBI Tactical has one of them," Patterson announced, pressing his phone to his ear. "Pentagon facility." She was in an isolated server room with encrypted communications equipment. "Who is she?" Carmichael demanded. Patterson listened, then paled. "Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Cyber Policy, Melissa Chin. She's had her position for 3 years. Security clearance at the highest level. No red flags, no warning signs. Perfect record. Until she wasn't," Colonel Reeves muttered. 2 hours later, they had 3 more. All similar stories. Mid to high-level officials with years of perfect service suddenly revealed as deep-cover operatives. Chandler watched the interrogation feeds on secured monitors, seeing people who looked like ordinary government employees calmly admit to being part of something much larger. "They won't tell us the endgame," the FBI director reported. "They've been trained for this. They know we can't break them in time. Then we break their plan instead," Carmichael said. She turned to Chandler. "Can you shut down their algorithm?" "Not without knowing what it's going to do first," Chandler replied. "If I shut it down now, we might trigger whatever they're planning. We need to understand it completely, then understand it faster." Chandler dove back into the code, Rivera and Patterson working alongside him. The algorithm was a masterpiece of malicious programming, elegant, sophisticated, and deeply, terrifyingly clever. But as the hours passed, patterns emerged. "It's focusing on satellite systems," Rivera observed. "Specifically, military satellites in geosynchronous orbit over the Pacific." "Why those?" Patterson asked. "Because," Chandler said slowly, the pieces clicking together, "those satellites provide early warning for ballistic missile launches. And if you controlled them, you could fake a launch signature. Or hide a real one," Rivera finished. Colonel Reeves leaned forward. "Explain." "They're not trying to launch our missiles," Chandler said. "They're trying to launch their own and make it look like ours. They need our satellites, our launch codes, our authentication protocols, not to use them, but to fake them. To create a perfect digital signature that makes any missile they launch look like it came from us." "Launched it who?" the deputy director asked, though his face suggested he already knew. "China," Colonel Reeves said flatly. "Jesus Christ. They want to start a war." "Not just any war," Chandler replied, pulling up a new screen. "Look at the satellite positioning they're trying to control. These specific satellites provide early warning coverage for China's eastern coast. If they control those satellites, they can do 2 things. First, blind China's ability to detect an incoming missile until it's too late to evacuate. And second, make absolutely certain that when China retaliates, they retaliate against us." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "How?" Carmichael finally asked. "How are they planning to launch? We've accounted for all our nuclear assets." "Not nuclear," Chandler said, his stomach churning. "Look at this." He pulled up the algorithm's target systems. They're not after ICBM facilities. They're after something else. See this? They've been probing the manifest systems for commercial shipping. Specifically, cargo containers entering the port of Hong Kong. A dirty bomb, Patterson breathed. They're going to detonate a radiological device in China. Not just detonate, Rivera corrected, his face gray. They're going to make it look like we launched it. A radiological weapon with an American signature, delivered to Chinese soil, with every piece of digital evidence pointing back to a U.S. military operation. Giving China no choice but to retaliate, Colonel Reeves finished, with nuclear weapons, against major American cities. We need to evacuate Hong Kong, someone said. We can't, the FBI director replied. We don't even know when the device is supposed to detonate. Could be hours, days, weeks. We can't evacuate a city of 7 million on a maybe. Then we find the bomb, Carmichael said. Mason, can you track it? Chandler was already searching, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The algorithm had left breadcrumbs throughout the shipping manifests, but they were encrypted, hidden in plain sight as ordinary logistics data. There, he said after 20 minutes of desperate searching. Container MV 2891-447, currently on the cargo ship Eastern Promise, arrived in Hong Kong harbor 3 days ago. It's been sitting on the dock waiting for customs clearance. What's the manifest say is in it? Industrial equipment. Ball bearings, according to the paperwork. But look at the weight discrepancy. The container is listed at 8 tons, but the ship's cargo manifest shows it displacing 9 tons. Someone added a ton of something that's not on the official manifest. That's our bomb, Colonel Reeves said. I'll contact Chinese authorities. No, Carmichael held up a hand. Think about this. If we contact China right now and tell them there's a radiological device on their docks that we somehow know about, what does that look like? We're playing right into the plot. They'll think we're behind it, making some kind of preemptive confession. Then what do you suggest? We defuse it ourselves, Carmichael said. Quietly, without involving Chinese authorities until we have the device secured and can prove we had nothing to do with it. You're talking about running an unauthorized military operation on Chinese soil, the deputy director said carefully. I'm talking about preventing World War III, Carmichael countered. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with the president. Oh wait, she pulled up a status screen. We can't reach the president because his secure communications are down. How convenient. The terrorists made sure of that, Chen said. They've isolated everyone who could authorize a response. Then we operate without authorization, Colonel Reeves said. I have assets in the region. A SEAL team training in the Philippine Sea. They can be in Hong Kong in 6 hours. Won't work, Chandler interjected. Look at the algorithm's behavior pattern. It's monitoring all U.S. military movements in the Pacific. The moment you deploy those SEALs, the terrorists will know. They'll detonate the bomb early. Then what do we do? Chandler stared at his screen, his mind racing. The algorithm was watching everything, controlled by 12 operatives embedded so deeply in their systems that they seemed impossible to root out in time. The bomb was sitting in Hong Kong harbor with a countdown they couldn't see, ready to kill millions and start a war. Unless, I can do it, Chandler heard himself say. Everyone turned to stare at him. I can shut them down. Not the algorithm, that's too risky, but I can cut off their control. I can isolate the 12 cells, segment the network so they can't communicate with each other or their algorithm. Without coordination, their plan falls apart. Can you do that without them knowing? Carmichael asked. I don't know. Maybe, if I'm lucky. Define lucky. If I can create a counter-algorithm that mimics their control signals while actually severing their connections. They'll think they're still in control while we're actually locking them out. It'll give us a window, maybe 30 minutes, maybe less, where they're blind and we can move. 30 minutes to defuse a dirty bomb we've never seen, using a team we can't deploy without being detected, Patterson summarized. That's insane. You have a better idea? Chandler shot back. Silence. Do it, Carmichael ordered. Reeves, get me someone in Hong Kong who isn't military and can't be tracked by military monitoring systems. CIA, private contractor, I don't care. Someone who can get to that dock without triggering alarms. On it. Mason, Carmichael continued. You have 6 hours to build your counter-algorithm. Make them count. Chandler had never programmed so fast in his life. The counter-algorithm was a delicate thing, requiring him to perfectly mimic the terrorists' control signatures while simultaneously subverting them. Too obvious and they'd detect it. Too subtle and it wouldn't work. Rivera and Patterson helped, the three of them working in a coding frenzy that would have been exhilarating under different circumstances. They tested it on isolated systems, refined it, rebuilt it from scratch twice when they found fatal flaws. At hour 4, FBI tactical teams captured 3 more of the 12 cells. At hour 5, they got 2 more. 7 of 12 down, 5 still operating. But those 5 were the most dangerous, the ones embedded deepest, with the most access, the most resources. And they were getting nervous. They know something's wrong, Rivera announced at hour 5:30. Look at their behavior pattern. They're trying to accelerate their timeline. How long do we have? Carmichael asked. I estimate they'll attempt to detonate within the next 12 hours. Maybe sooner if they get more spooked. Then we move now, Colonel Reeves said. I have our asset in position in Hong Kong. Former bomb disposal technician, now working private security. He's at the dock, waiting for your signal. Chandler took a deep breath. The counter-algorithm was as ready as it would ever be. Time to find out if it worked. Deploying now, he said, and pressed enter. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, signal disruption detected, Rivera reported. The cells are trying to send commands and getting echoes back. They think their commands are going through, but actually, we've got them in a loop, Chandler finished. They're talking to themselves. They don't know it yet, but they've lost control. How long until they figure it out? 28 minutes. Maybe less. Colonel Reeves was already on the phone. This is Reeves. You are go. Repeat, you are go. You have 28 minutes to locate and neutralize the device. Authorization code Reeves Delta 79. Everyone in the room watched the clock. 28 minutes to save the world. Chapter 4. Marcus Webb wasn't supposed to be anyone's idea of a hero. At 53, with a bad knee from his army days and a tendency to drink too much on weekends, he'd settled into a comfortable life as a security consultant for shipping companies in Hong Kong. Easy money, minimal danger, nothing like the war zones he'd seen in Iraq and Afghanistan. Then his old CO called with a job that sounded completely insane. Now he was standing on Dock 47 of Hong Kong's industrial port at 2 a.m. local time, staring at a shipping container that might contain a dirty bomb capable of killing millions, with nothing but a toolkit and a radiation detector that kept beeping ominously. Talk to me, Webb. Colonel Reeves' voice crackled through his encrypted earpiece. What's your status? Container located, Webb replied, approaching the massive steel box. Radiation signature confirmed. Definitely something hot in there. Can you open it? Working on it. Webb pulled out a bolt cutter, but the container's locks were military grade. He switched to thermite charges. This is going to make noise. Noise is better than nuclear war. Do what you need to do. Webb placed the charges and stepped back. 3 bright flares of white-hot chemical reaction, and the locks fell away. He pulled open the container door, and, Jesus Christ. What? Webb, what do you see? I see why the manifest was wrong about the weight. Webb stared into the container. This isn't a bomb. It's a factory. Inside the 40-foot container was a complete radiological weapon assembly facility. Explosives, radiological materials in lead-line cases, sophisticated timing mechanisms, and enough additional materials to build not one but potentially dozens of dirty bombs. They're not just trying to detonate one device, Webb said slowly. They're trying to distribute them. Multiple targets, all with American fingerprints. Can you defuse it? Reeves asked. I can defuse the assembled device. But there's enough material here to contaminate half of Hong Kong if it's not handled properly. We need a full hazmat team. We don't have time for proper procedures. Do what you can. And Webb? Yeah, those timers. Are they counting down? Webb looked closer at the assembled bomb. Digital displays glowed in the darkness. Numbers descending, but not all of them showed the same time. Multiple countdowns, he reported. Different intervals. The shortest one shows 23 minutes. That matches our timeline, Reeves said. They're going to detonate the moment they realize they've lost control. Can you stop it? I can try. Webb had defused IEDs in Iraq, disarmed insurgent bombs in Afghanistan, taught counterterrorism bomb disposal for 3 years at Fort Bragg. But this was different. This was a sophisticated radiological device built by someone who knew what they were doing, designed to be tamper-resistant. He pulled out his toolkit and got to work. Back at Fort Meade, Chandler watched the clock tick down while monitoring the counter-algorithm's performance. So far, the 5 remaining terrorist cells hadn't detected his deception. They were sending commands, receiving false confirmations, believing they were still in control. But cracks were starting to show. Cell 3 is getting suspicious, Rivera reported. They're running diagnostic checks on their connection. Can you spoof those? Trying. Patterson pulled up a new screen. FBI Tactical has Cell 8 cornered at DARPA. They're barricaded in a server room. Tell them to wait, Carmichael ordered. The moment they breach, the other cells will know something's wrong. And if Cell 8 destroys evidence? Better than them tipping off the others and detonating early. The clock showed 19 minutes. Webb status. Colonel Reeves called. First layer of defenses bypassed. Webb's voice came back, strained. But this thing has more redundancies than a doomsday device. Which, I suppose, is exactly what it is. Talk me through it. 3 separate timer systems, all running independently. I can disable one, but the others will detect the power disruption and accelerate their countdowns. I need to disable all 3 simultaneously. How? With at least 2 extra hands and a lot of luck. Unfortunately, I'm short on both. Chandler listened to the exchange, his mind racing. A 3-part system requiring simultaneous disabling. He'd seen that before, not in bomb disposal but in network security. Distributed systems designed to detect and respond to isolated failures. Webb, he said. Can you describe the timer systems? Their physical layout and how they're connected. Who's this? The kid who found the bomb. Just answer the question. Webb grunted. 3 separate units, each about the size of a shoebox. They're connected by fiber optic cables in a triangle configuration. Each unit monitors the others. If one goes down, the others compensate. And if 2 go down, the third detonates immediately. What if they all think they're still running when they're not? There was a pause. You want to hack a bomb? I want to do to those timers what I did to the terrorists' network. Make them think they're still counting down when actually they're frozen. Can you access their control interfaces? They're air-gapped. No wireless, no network connection. But they have to have some kind of input mechanism. Programming interface, diagnostic port, something. Another pause. Yeah, each unit has a USB port for programming. But I don't have... You don't need a computer, Chandler interrupted. You just need a USB killer. A what? A USB device that delivers a high-voltage surge when connected. It'll fry the controller chips while leaving the power supplies running. The timers will be dead, but the indicators will still show active. The other units won't detect the failure because from their perspective, nothing's changed. That's insane. Do you have a better idea? Silence. USB killer, Webb muttered. Where the hell am I supposed to find 3 USB killers in the next? He stopped. Wait, I don't need USB killers. I just need to make one. And I've got a shipping container full of electronics components. Can you build them in time? Reeves asked. Let's find out. The clock showed 14 minutes. Cell 3 has figured it out. Rivera announced. They've detected the deception. They're trying to send an emergency alert to the other cells. Block it, Carmichael ordered. Blocking, but they'll find another way to communicate. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they all know. Webb needs 12, Reeves said grimly. Then we buy him 12. Chandler's fingers flew across the keyboard. If the terrorists wanted to communicate, he'd give them communication, just not the kind they expected. He unleashed a data flood, billions of packets of meaningless noise designed to look like legitimate traffic, overwhelming their ability to distinguish real messages from garbage. That'll slow them down, he said. But not for long. The clock showed 12 minutes. FBI Tactical is breaching Cell 8, Patterson reported. They couldn't wait any longer. The sound of flashbangs and shouting echoed through the open phone line. Then, Cell 8 contained. Subject in custody. For cells left, Carmichael said. Mason, how long can you keep them isolated? 3, maybe 4 more minutes. Then they'll break through. 8 minutes left. Webb, I need an update, Reeves demanded. First device ready, Webb replied, his voice tight. 2 more to build. And I need to deploy all 3 simultaneously, which is going to be acrobatically challenging. Be creative. I'm being creative. I'm using strip wire and electrical tape to create a simultaneous trigger mechanism out of components I found in a container full of weapon components while standing next to enough radioactive material to give me superpowers or super cancer. I'm not sure which. If that's not creative, I don't know what is. Despite the tension, someone in the room laughed. 6 minutes. Cell 4 has gone dark, Rivera reported. They've shut down their connection entirely. That's not good, Patterson said. That's actually worse than not good, Chandler replied. If they've shut down, they might be trying to manually trigger the detonation. Can they do that? If they have backup communications we haven't detected? Yes. For minutes. Second device ready, Webb announced. Starting on the 3rd. Webb, Colonel Reeves said carefully. If you can't finish in time, you need to get out of there. Not a chance, ma'am. I didn't come this far to leave the job half done. That's an order. With respect, Colonel, I can't hear you very well. Must be a bad connection. 2 minutes. Cell 7 is trying to send a signal to the bomb, Rivera said. They're using a backup satellite uplink we didn't know about. Block it, Carmichael ordered. I'm trying. It's encrypted with a code I've never seen before. Let me... Chandler interrupted. He pulled up the signal and stared at the encryption pattern. It was similar to the algorithm's quantum randomization, but different. Simpler. Almost crude by comparison. Almost too crude. It's a fake, he said suddenly. They want us to block it. It's a distraction from the real signal. Where's the real signal? I don't know, but... He pulled up a different view, looking not for encrypted communications but for their absence. There. Cell 2 just stopped transmitting entirely. Radio silence. But their power consumption spiked. They're sending something we can't detect, Rivera realized. Quantum entanglement, Chandler said. They have quantum communicators. That's how they've been coordinating without us detecting it. The algorithm was just the visible part of their operation. 1 minute. Webb, Reeves shouted. You've got 60 seconds. Third device ready. Deploying now. 30 seconds. In Hong Kong, Marcus Webb wrapped the 3 homemade USB killers with a makeshift harness of wire and tape, positioned them over the 3 timer units, and said a prayer to a god he wasn't sure he believed in. 20 seconds. At Fort Meade, Chandler watched helplessly as quantum-entangled signals he couldn't intercept flickered across his screen like ghosts. 10 seconds. Done, Webb shouted. Devices deployed. If this doesn't work, the timers hit 0. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nothing happened. Then Webb's voice came back, shaken but alive. Timers dead. Detonators disabled. Bomb is neutralized. The room at Fort Meade erupted in cheers, but Carmichael held up a hand. We're not done. We still have 4 terrorist cells active, and they're going to realize their plan failed any second. As if on cue, Alarms started blaring. "They know," Chen reported. "All remaining cells are going active. They're trying to implement some kind of backup plan." "What backup plan?" Chandler's screen exploded with activity. The algorithm, which had been lying dormant under his counter-algorithm's control, suddenly came alive with a vengeance. But it wasn't attacking their networks anymore. It was attacking everything. Power grids, water systems, transportation networks, financial systems, communications infrastructure. The algorithm wasn't trying to be subtle anymore. It was trying to cause maximum chaos, maximum destruction, maximum fear. "They're scorching the earth," Patterson said. "If they can't start their war, they're going to try to collapse our entire infrastructure. How long until they succeed? At this rate, 20 minutes until we start seeing cascading failures across every major system on the eastern seaboard. An hour until the entire country is in chaos." Chandler stared at his screen, watching the algorithm rampage through systems like a digital wildfire. He'd stopped their physical attack, but this cyber assault was just as dangerous in its own way. And suddenly he realized something. "They're not trying to destroy everything," he said slowly. "They're trying to make us destroy it ourselves." "What?" "Look at the pattern. The algorithm isn't directly attacking these systems. It's triggering their automated security responses. It's making them think they're under attack, causing them to shut down defensively. The chaos isn't from the algorithm, it's from our own defenses." "So we disable the defenses?" "No. We make the algorithm think it's succeeding when it's not." Chandler's fingers flew across the keyboard, building on the counter-algorithm he'd already created. If he could make the algorithm think its attacks were working, it would stop trying to escalate. And if he could make it report success back to its controllers, "I need direct access to the quantum communication system they're using," he said. "You can't access quantum entanglement," Rivera protested. "That's the whole point. It's undetectable, unhackable. I don't need to hack it. I just need to find the quantum processors that are generating the entangled particles and shut them down. Without entanglement, their backup communication falls apart. Those processors are in the facilities we already identified," Patterson said. "But we don't have people there who can shut them down. The few staff we have on site don't have the clearance to access quantum systems." "Then I'll do it," Chandler said. "I'm at NSA Fort Meade. According to my analysis, one of the quantum processors is here." "In this building?" "Subbasement 3, Quantum Research Wing." Carmichael and Colonel Reeves exchanged glances. "You'd need level 9 clearance to access that area," Carmichael said. "I have level 3 clearance and 5 days of experience," Chandler replied. "But I'm also the only person in this room who knows what needs to be done and how to do it. So either you override the security protocols and let me try, or we sit here and watch the country fall apart." Another alarm blared. "Major power failure reported in Washington, D.C., someone called out. "Cascading outages spreading." "Do it," Carmichael said. "Mason, you have clearance. Go." Chandler ran. Chapter 5. The NSA's quantum research facility occupied a subbasement that officially didn't exist. Chandler had heard rumors about it during his brief orientation, but he'd never expected to see it. Now he was sprinting through corridors lit by emergency lighting, his newly issued level 9 access badge slapping against his chest, while the building's automated systems tried to figure out if he was an authorized user or an intruder. "Left at the next junction," Patterson's voice guided through his earpiece. "Then down 2 flights of stairs. You should see a biometric scanner at the secure door." Chandler found it, pressed his thumb to the scanner, held his breath. The door clicked open. The quantum research wing was larger than he'd expected. A vast underground chamber filled with cooling systems and electromagnetic shielding. At the center, surrounded by monitoring equipment, was the quantum processor, a machine that looked like a golden chandelier suspended in a cylindrical cryogenic chamber. "I'm at the processor," Chandler reported. "But I don't know how to shut it down without damaging it permanently." "You don't need to shut it down," Chen's voice replied. "You need to disrupt its quantum coherence." Just for a few seconds. That'll break the entanglement without causing permanent damage. How? You see the cooling system? It's maintaining the processor at near absolute zero. Raise the temperature even slightly, and the quantum states will decohere. Chandler looked at the complex cooling apparatus. This is going to void someone's warranty. He found the emergency shutdown switch for the cooling system. Pulled it. Nothing happened for 3 seconds. Then warning lights began flashing, and the temperature readings started climbing. Slowly at first, then faster. It's working, Rivera reported from Fort Meade. Quantum coherence dropping. The entanglement is breaking down. Cells are going dark, someone else called out. They've lost their backup communication. Good, Carmichael said. Now let's finish this. FBI Tactical, you are clear to breach all remaining cells. Authorization code. Wait, Chandler interrupted. He was staring at the quantum processor, watching its temperature climb, when something occurred to him. If we shut down all their communication right now, they're going to realize they've completely lost and might do something desperate. Like what? Colonel Reeves asked. Like trigger manual backups we don't know about. Remember, these people have been planning this for years. You think they don't have contingencies? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we don't just capture them. We trick them. Use their own quantum communication system against them. Mason, Carmichael said carefully. That processor is melting. You have maybe 30 seconds before it's permanently damaged. Chandler looked at the controls. The quantum processor could be recalibrated, rebooted, brought back online. But not as it was. As something new. As something that could send one final message to the terrorist cells. Give me control of the quantum communication system, he said. I need to send a message. You need to evacuate that room, Patterson countered. The radiation shielding is compromised. You're being exposed. I need 2 minutes. That's all. A pause. Then Carmichael's voice. You have 2 minutes. Make them count. Chandler's fingers flew over the quantum processor's control interface. The system was already decohering, already losing its quantum states, but he could use that. He could modulate the decoherence, turn it into a signal, send one last burst of quantum entangled information before the system collapsed entirely. He crafted his message carefully. Mission successful. Bomb detonated. War initiated. Extract and disperse. Then he encoded it with the same quantum signature the terrorists had been using, pushed the temperature just slightly higher to create the exact decoherence pattern that would transmit the message, and waited. Message sent, he reported. The cells should receive it in 3, 2, 1. Back at the main operations center, Rivera watched his monitors. I'm seeing responses from all 4 remaining cells. They're shutting down their operations. They think they succeeded. FBI Tactical, Carmichael ordered. Move in now. All cells simultaneously. For the next 5 minutes, reports flooded in. Cell 2 contained. State Department. 2 subjects in custody. Cell 5 contained. CIA Langley. 1 subject in custody. Cell 9 contained. Strackham alternate. 1 subject killed resisting arrest. 2 in custody. Cell 12 contained. Naval Research Lab. 3 subjects in custody. That's all 12, Patterson said, almost not believing it. All 12 cells captured or neutralized. Mason, Carmichael called. Status. Chandler was leaning against the wall of the quantum research chamber, his head spinning. The radiation exposure was catching up with him. Quantum processor is offline. Communication system destroyed. But ma'am, I think I need a medic. Already on the way. Chandler woke up in a hospital bed 6 hours later. His head ached. His stomach was queasy. And there was an 4 in his arm feeding him something that the doctor said was counteracting radiation exposure. How bad? He asked groggily. You'll live, the doctor replied. You absorbed about 3 times the annual safe limit in those 2 minutes, but nothing that will cause permanent damage. You'll need monitoring and you should probably avoid X-rays for a while, but you're going to be fine. Guess I won't be having kids anytime soon. Actually, your fertility should be completely unaffected. Radiation exposure to the extremities and thorax was minimal. That's good news, because I haven't even managed a date yet. Director Carmichael appeared in the doorway. How's our hero? Glowing, Chandler replied. Possibly literally. She smiled. You'll be happy to know we've secured all 12 cells. We're currently interrogating the operatives, and they're starting to talk. The group calls themselves 0 Day. They believe the world is on a countdown to societal collapse, and they're trying to accelerate the timeline. By starting World War III? Their logic is complicated and deeply disturbed. But yes, essentially, they've been infiltrating government positions for over a decade, placing sleeper agents in key positions, waiting for the right moment to activate. Why now? We're still piecing that together, but it appears to be connected to some kind of anniversary. 10 years since their founder, a former intelligence officer named Viktor Kozlov, was supposedly killed in a black ops mission gone wrong. Supposedly? We never found a body, and now we're not so sure he's actually dead. Chandler processed this. So we stopped their plan, but their leader might still be out there. Possibly. But without his network, without his operatives, he's just one man. We'll find him. And the dirty bomb? Secured. We have a hazmat team processing the container in Hong Kong. The Chinese government has been diplomatically informed of the situation. They're not thrilled that we ran an operation on their soil without permission, but they're also grateful we prevented a radiological catastrophe. Politics will be complicated for a while. Politics is above my pay grade. About that, Carmichael pulled up a chair. Your pay grade is about to change significantly. The president wants to meet you. So does the Joint Chiefs. You're going to be offered positions, opportunities, clearances you can't imagine. You're famous now, Mason. Or you will be, once this story gets declassified in about 20 years. I just did my job, Chandler protested. You did everyone's job. You did things that intelligence analysts with 30 years of experience couldn't figure out. In 5 days, I got lucky. Luck is finding $1 on the sidewalk. You saved millions of lives and prevented a global war. That's not luck. That's exceptional talent combined with courage under pressure. She stood. Get some rest. When you're cleared for discharge, you and I need to have a conversation about your future. After she left, Chandler lay back in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. His brain was still processing everything that had happened. 5 days ago, he'd been a nervous new hire, terrified of making a mistake. Now he was, what, a hero? It didn't feel real. His phone buzzed. A text from Patterson. Media's going crazy. They know something big happened, but not what. Official story is cybersecurity exercise. You're being described as an NSA analyst who noticed an anomaly. Try not to let it go to your head. Chandler smiled and typed back. Too late. I'm already planning my memoir. Working title, Glowing Reviews. How I Saved the World and Got Radiation Poisoning in My First Week. Patterson's response was immediate. I hate you. You love me and you know it. I tolerate you. There's a difference. Chandler laughed, then winced as his head throbbed. The doctor had said he'd be fine, but fine was apparently a relative term when it came to radiation exposure. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind kept running. Something Carmichael had said bothered him. Viktor Kozlov, the supposed founder of 0 Day, supposedly dead, but no body ever found. If Kozlov was still alive, if he was still out there, what would he do now? His entire network was compromised, his sleeper cells captured or killed, his plan foiled. Would he give up? Or would he try again? Chandler's eyes snapped open. The quantum processor. When he disrupted its coherence, when he'd sent that final message, he'd assumed he was talking to the 4 remaining cells. But what if there was another receiver? What if Kozlov himself had quantum communication capability? If so, Chandler had just told him that the mission was successful. Oh no, Chandler whispered. He reached for his phone, but before he could call Patterson, every light in the hospital went out. Chapter 6. The backup generators kicked in after 5 seconds, flooding the hospital hallways with emergency lighting. But in those 5 seconds of darkness, Chandler's mind raced through a dozen terrible scenarios. This wasn't a normal power outage. He yanked the 4 from his arm, ignoring the blood that welled up, and stumbled out of bed. His hospital gown was embarrassingly short, but there wasn't time to worry about dignity. He grabbed his phone and called Patterson. "The power just went out," Chandler said without preamble. "Here too," Patterson replied, his voice tight, "all across Fort Meade. But our backup systems should have." The call dropped. Chandler tried again. No signal. He checked his phone's display. No cellular connection. No Wi-Fi. No data at all. Communications blackout. He found his clothes in a small closet and dressed quickly. His hands shaking from either adrenaline or radiation exposure. He wasn't sure which. Then he stepped into the hallway. The hospital was in chaos. Doctors and nurses rushed past, trying to manage patients whose life support systems had switched to battery power. Alarms beeped incessantly. Someone was crying. Chandler pushed through the crowd toward the stairs. Elevators would be out, when a familiar voice stopped him. "Going somewhere, Mr. Mason?" He turned. A man stood at the end of the hallway, backlit by emergency lighting. Average height, maybe 50 years old, wearing a maintenance worker's uniform. Something about his posture suggested military training. "Who are you?" Chandler asked, though he already suspected. "Someone who's very impressed with your work." That quantum message was quite clever. It almost fooled me. Almost. The man smiled. "You assumed I only had 4 remaining cells active. That was a reasonable assumption, given the information available to you. But tell me, Mr. Mason, if you were planning an operation of this magnitude, would you really put all your assets in positions where they could be traced?" Chandler's blood ran cold. "You have more sleeper cells. I have resources. Not all of them human. Not all of them in positions your colleagues could identify." The man started walking toward him, unhurried. "The 12 cells you found? They were the sacrificial pieces. The ones meant to draw attention while the real operation proceeded. You're Kozlov. I'm disappointed it took you this long to figure that out. I expected better from the man who unraveled my algorithm." "Your algorithm was designed to be found," Chandler realized. "You wanted us to detect it. Wanted us to focus on the sleeper cells while you did something else." "Very good. And what do you think that something else might be?" Chandler's mind raced. The dirty bomb in Hong Kong had been real. Webb had confirmed that. The assassinations had been real. The sleeper cells had been real. But if they were all diversions, what was the actual target? "The quantum processor," he said slowly. "I destroyed it, but that was the point. You wanted me to take it offline." "Correct again. You're really quite brilliant. It's a shame you won't live to appreciate that brilliance." Kozlov pulled a gun from beneath his maintenance uniform. It was small, probably a .22 with a suppressor attached. A close-range assassination weapon. "Why?" Chandler asked, backing away. "Why all of this? What's the point?" "The point," Kozlov said, "is that the world is sleepwalking toward catastrophe. Governments are corrupt, systems are failing, society is fracturing. Someone needs to wake them up, force them to rebuild, to change. By killing millions? By providing the catalyst for transformation. Your country was supposed to take the fall for the Hong Kong bombing. China was supposed to retaliate. The nuclear exchange would have been unfortunate but necessary. A hard reset. You're insane. I'm practical. But you've complicated things. Without the Hong Kong bombing, without the Chinese retaliation, I need to adjust my approach." He raised the gun. "Starting with eliminating witnesses who know too much." Chandler looked around frantically. The hallway was clearing as staff herded patients to safer areas. No one was watching. No one would see. "You said the quantum processor was the point," Chandler said, stalling. "Why did you need it offline?" "Because while it was online, it could detect certain quantum signatures. Signatures that would have revealed my actual operation. Kozlov smiled. But now that it's offline, now that your attention is focused elsewhere, my real assets can move freely. Real assets doing what? Deploying the devices your teams missed. Not one dirty bomb in Hong Kong, 12 of them in 12 major cities worldwide. Detonating simultaneously in approximately, he checked his watch. For minutes. Chandler's stomach dropped. That's impossible. We would have detected them. You detected what I wanted you to detect. You found shipping containers because I led you to them. But you never thought to look at diplomatic pouches, did you? Cargo protected by international treaty, passing through customs without inspection? Each one containing components that were assembled by sleeper agents you never knew existed. You're bluffing. Am I? Let me prove it. Kozlov pulled out a phone, not a smartphone, but an old-fashioned flip phone, probably not connected to any network. He pressed a button, and a screen lit up showing 12 countdown timers, all showing 3:42, 3:41, 3:40. London, Paris, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Lagos, Sydney, Toronto, Mexico City, and Los Angeles. Kozlov recited. 12 cities, millions dead. The world will burn, and from those ashes, something better will emerge. I'll stop you. How? You can't communicate with anyone. The power grid is down. Your quantum processor is destroyed. And even if you could somehow warn them, there isn't time to evacuate 12 cities. 3:30. Chandler's mind raced. Kozlov was right. There wasn't time for evacuations. But maybe there was time for something else. The timers, Chandler said. They're synchronized. Obviously. Which means they're coordinated by a central signal. Probably the same quantum entanglement system your cells used. Had used. Past tense. You destroyed it, remember? I destroyed a quantum processor. But if you have backup sleeper cells, you have backup communication systems. Probably at least one more quantum processor that you kept hidden. Kozlov's smile faltered slightly. And if all 12 devices are synchronized, Chandler continued, his confidence growing. That means they're receiving continuous timing signals, which means they're not truly autonomous. Which means if I could find your backup processor and disrupt it. Kozlov pulled the trigger. The bullet missed Chandler by inches, punching a hole in the wall behind him. The suppressor made the shot sound like a loud cough, but it was enough to startle a nurse who had just emerged from a patient room. She screamed. Kozlov fired again, this time hitting the nurse in the shoulder. She went down, clutching her wound, and Kozlov turned back toward Chandler. But Chandler was already moving. He dove through the nearest door, a supply closet, and slammed it shut. The door had a lock. He engaged it, knowing it would only buy seconds. His phone still showed no signal. The hospital's internal Wi-Fi was down. But hospitals had backup systems, redundant communications, emergency protocols. He found a landline phone mounted on the wall of the supply closet. Picked it up. Dead. 3 o'clock. Mr. Mason? Kozlov called from outside the door. You're only making this harder on yourself. Open the door and I'll make it quick. Chandler ignored him, looking around the supply closet. Medical supplies, cleaning equipment, spare linens. Nothing useful as a weapon. But there was a ventilation grate in the ceiling. He pulled a shelf unit over, climbed up, and pried the grate off. The ventilation duct was small but navigable if he squeezed. He pulled himself up and into the duct just as Kozlov shot the lock off the door and burst in. Clever boy, Kozlov muttered, looking up at the open vent. But he was too old and too large to follow. Run all you want. You can't stop what's coming. Chandler crawled through the ductwork, his elbows and knees scraping on the metal. The ventilation system connected to the entire hospital. If he could reach the communications room or the security office or anywhere with functioning equipment, 2:30. His mind worked furiously as he crawled. Kozlov's backup quantum processor had to be nearby. He wouldn't risk long-distance communication with his backup plan. Too much could go wrong. So it was local. Somewhere in the DC area. Somewhere with power, shielding, security. Somewhere like the Pentagon, Chandler whispered. Of course. One of the terrorist cells had been at the Pentagon. They'd been captured, but their equipment hadn't been found, because it was too well hidden, or because no one had thought to look for a quantum processor in a building full of classified technology. 2 o'clock. Chandler reached an intersection in the ventilation system and chose the duct leading toward the hospital's administrative wing. He needed a phone, computer, any kind of communication device. He emerged from a vent in what appeared to be an executive office, dropped to the floor and immediately went to the desk. The computer was dark, no power, but there was a phone. He picked it up. Silence. Then, repeat. All emergency services respond to Priority 1 incident at Fort Meade facility. We have reports of a shooter in. Someone was broadcasting on emergency channels. The hospital's backup communications were working, at least partially. This is Chandler Mason, NSA, he said quickly. I need to be connected to Director Sarah Carmichael immediately. This is a national security emergency. Authorization code. He paused. He didn't have an authorization code. He'd been on the job for 5 days. Sir, I'll need verification of your identity before I can. There's no time for verification. In approximately 90 seconds, 12 radiological devices are going to detonate in 12 cities worldwide. The coordination signal is coming from a quantum processor located somewhere at the Pentagon. You need to shut it down now. Pause. Then a different voice. Mason? This is Patterson. Where the hell are you? Hospital. There's a shooter, Victor Kozlov. He's the one behind 0 Day. He has backup devices we missed. They're going to detonate in less than 2 minutes. The control signal is coming from the Pentagon. The Pentagon was cleared, Patterson replied. We swept every... You missed something. There's a quantum processor there. Probably in an isolated server room, shielded from detection. You need to find it and disrupt its quantum coherence the same way I did at Fort Meade. 1:30. That's a massive building with multiple isolated server rooms, Patterson protested. We don't have time to search them all. Then shut down power to the entire building. Cut the cooling systems. The quantum processor needs to be at near absolute zero to maintain entanglement. Raise the temperature and you break the connection. You're talking about shutting down the Pentagon. Do you have any idea how many critical systems will go offline? I'm talking about saving 12 cities. Do it. Another voice cut in. Director Carmichael. Patterson, execute Mason's plan. Authorize emergency power shutdown for Pentagon facility. Authorization code Carmichael Alpha 37. All backup systems offline for 60 seconds. That's not enough time to... Do it now! 1 o'clock. Chandler listened as Patterson relayed orders, as emergency protocols were activated, as one of the most secure buildings in the world was voluntarily crippled. 0:45. Power is down at the Pentagon, Patterson reported. All systems offline, including cooling. If there's a quantum processor there, it should start losing coherence in approximately 30 seconds. Will that be fast enough? Carmichael asked. I don't know, Chandler admitted. 0:30. Somewhere in the Pentagon's darkened corridors, a quantum processor began to warm. Its superconducting circuits, maintained at temperatures colder than deep space, began to lose their perfect order. Quantum states that had been carefully maintained for months began to waver, to decohere, to collapse. And in 12 cities worldwide, radiological devices that had been receiving precise timing signals suddenly found themselves without guidance. 0:15. 0:10. 0:05. Midnight. Chandler held his breath. Nothing happened. Reports coming in from all 12 cities, someone announced. No detonations detected. Repeat, no detonations. A collective exhale of relief echoed through the phone connection. We need to locate and secure those devices immediately, Carmichael said. I'm contacting international authorities now. Mason, you just saved the world for the second time in 1 week. I'm recommending you for immediate promotion. Ma'am, Chandler said quietly. Viktor Kozlov is here, at the hospital. He's armed and trying to kill witnesses. The relief vanished instantly. Security is on the way. Stay hidden until they arrive. Copy that. Chandler hung up and looked around the office. He'd bought himself time, but Kozlov was still hunting him. And a desperate terrorist with nothing left to lose was maybe the most dangerous thing in the world. He needed a weapon, or a plan, or both. The office had a letter opener on the desk. It wasn't much, but it was something. He grabbed it and moved toward the door. Then he heard footsteps in the hallway. Chapter 7. Chandler pressed himself against the wall beside the door, letter opener gripped in his sweating hand. The footsteps approached slowly, methodically. Someone searching room by room. I know you're here somewhere, Mason. Kozlov's voice drifted through the door. I can see the ventilation grate you came through. Very resourceful. But there are only so many rooms on this floor. Chandler looked around desperately. The office had one window, but they were on the 3rd floor. Jumping would mean broken bones at best. The ventilation duct he'd used was too far away to reach silently. He was trapped. You cost me everything, Kozlov continued, his voice getting closer. 15 years of planning. Billions of dollars in resources. A network of operatives who sacrificed their lives for the cause. All of it undone by an entry-level technician with 5 days of experience. The door handle began to turn. But you know what the funny thing is? Kozlov said. I'm almost impressed. You saw patterns no one else saw. Made connections no one else made. In another life, Mr. Mason, you and I could have worked together. The door opened. Kozlov stepped into the room, gun raised, and found it apparently empty. He moved inside cautiously, checking corners, looking for hiding spots. Chandler, pressed flat against the wall behind the door, held his breath. Kozlov walked further into the room, toward the desk, his back now to Chandler. This was the moment. Chandler raised the letter opener and Kozlov spun impossibly fast and fired. The bullet grazed Chandler's shoulder, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his arm and the letter opener clattered to the floor. He stumbled backward, hitting the desk. Did you really think I wouldn't check behind the door? Kozlov asked almost sadly. That's the first place anyone hides. You're smart, Mason, but you're not trained for this. He raised the gun, aiming for Chandler's head. Wait, Chandler gasped. You said you wanted to rebuild, to create something better. You can still do that. You don't need violence. You don't need to kill people. Just talk. Convince them. Change minds instead of bodies. Kozlov paused. You're trying to stall, hoping security arrives. I'm trying to understand. Why this way? Why not work within the system? You clearly have the intelligence, the resources, because the system is the problem. Kozlov's composure finally cracked. I tried working within it. Spent 20 years in intelligence watching politicians make stupid decisions. Seeing good people die because bureaucrats were too cowardly to act. The system doesn't work. Mason. Can't work. It needs to be burned down and rebuilt from scratch. And how many innocents die in that fire? Everyone who dies in the fire is part of the old world. The new world will be better, purer, stronger. You sound like every tyrant in history. They all thought they were building something better. They were all wrong. Or maybe they just didn't go far enough. Kozlov's finger tightened on the trigger. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. A figure in tactical gear swung through on a rappelling line, crashed into Kozlov, and sent both of them sprawling to the floor. The gun skittered away under a filing cabinet. More tactical team members poured through the door, weapons raised. Clear! Someone shouted. Subject contained. Kozlov struggled against the operator holding him down, screaming obscenities and threats. It took 3 people to fully restrain him. Colonel Reeves entered the room, surveyed the scene, and walked over to where Chandler sat against the desk, clutching his bleeding shoulder. You, she said. Have a remarkable talent for nearly getting yourself killed. It's a gift, Chandler managed. We're gonna need to work on that. EMTs are on the way up. Let's get that shoulder looked at. What about the devices? Chandler asked as the medics arrived. The 12 radiological bombs? Already being secured. Once we shut down the quantum processor, they stopped receiving detonation signals. Our international partners are locating and disarming them as we speak. Reeves allowed herself a small smile. You did good work, Mason. Exceptional work. I just connected the dots. You connected dots no one else even saw. That's not just skill. That's instinct. Intuition. The kind of thing that can't be taught. She helped him to his feet as the medics wrapped his shoulder. When you're recovered, you and I need to have a conversation about your future. Another conversation about my future? I'm starting to feel popular. Get used to it. What you did today is going to make you very popular with certain agencies. Though probably not popular in the way that gets you invited to parties. 3 weeks later, Chandler sat in a secure conference room deep beneath Fort Meade, surrounded by people whose names he still wasn't entirely sure he was cleared to know. Director Carmichael led the briefing. Final status report on Operation Zero Day, she announced. All 12 original sleeper cells have been fully interrogated and processed. We've identified 17 additional sleeper agents who were not part of the active cells but were placed as long-term assets. All have been arrested. What about the radiological devices? Someone asked. All 12 have been recovered and disarmed. No contamination. No casualties beyond the few unfortunate assassination victims during the initial operation. The devices were sophisticated but ultimately designed to be found and disarmed once we knew what we were looking for. And Kozlov? In custody at an undisclosed location. He's been cooperative, actually. Seems almost relieved it's over. He's provided us with detailed information about his network, his funding sources, his entire operation. Carmichael paused. He's also asked to speak with Mason. Everyone turned to look at Chandler. Why? Chandler asked. He says you're the only person who understood what he was trying to do. The only one who saw the full scope of his plan. He wants to. I believe his exact words were, compare notes with a worthy adversary. That's insane. Probably. But it might also be useful. He might reveal additional information if he's talking to you. And we still have gaps in our understanding of Zero Day's full network. Chandler thought about it. The idea of sitting across from a man who had tried to kill him, who had tried to kill millions, was deeply unsettling. But Carmichael was right. There was still more to learn. I'll do it, he said. But not alone. And definitely not without a lot of security between us. Agreed. We'll set it up for next week. Carmichael closed her folder. In the meantime, Mason, your temporary assignment to the operations center is being made permanent. You're also being promoted 2 grades, receiving a substantial salary increase, and being assigned to a new task force focused on detecting and preventing future sleeper cell operations. I still feel like I'm making this up as I go along, Chandler admitted. That's because you are, Carmichael replied. That's what makes you good at it. People who follow established procedures miss the unexpected. You see the unexpected because you haven't been trained to ignore it yet. Don't lose that. The meeting with Kozlov took place in a maximum security facility that Chandler was pretty sure violated several architectural principles by existing entirely underground. The room was divided by bulletproof glass, with Kozlov on one side and Chandler on the other. The terrorist mastermind looked smaller than Chandler remembered. Older. Tired. Mr. Mason, Kozlov said, picking up the phone that allowed them to communicate. Thank you for coming. I'm not sure I had much choice, Chandler replied, picking up his own phone. There's always a choice. You could have refused. But you're curious. You want to understand. That's what makes you dangerous. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a technician who noticed something weird. You're a pattern recognition savant who single-handedly dismantled a decade-long operation. Don't downplay your abilities. It's insulting to both of us. Chandler studied the man across from him. What do you want, Kozlov? To apologize, actually, for trying to kill you. It was unprofessional. You were just doing your job, and you did it brilliantly. You tried to start World War III. I tried to force evolution. Humanity is stagnant, complacent. We need crisis to grow. But perhaps my methods were too direct. You think? Kozlov smiled slightly. I've had time to reflect during my incarceration, and I've come to a conclusion. I was wrong about the method, but not the problem. The world still needs to change. It just needs someone smarter to make that change. If you're about to try to recruit me, no. I'm telling you to be ready. Zero Day wasn't the first group to see the world as broken. It won't be the last. Others will try. Some will be smarter than I was. And when they do, you'll be one of the few people capable of stopping them. Why tell me this? Because despite everything, I respect you. And because I've realized something. Maybe the world doesn't need to be burned down. Maybe it just needs better guardians. People who can see threats before they materialize. People like you. Chandler didn't know what to say to that. One more thing, Kozlov added. The quantum processor at the Pentagon. The one you disrupted to stop the detonations. It wasn't my only backup system. Chandler's blood went cold. What? I had a third quantum processor. Hidden where no one would think to look. It's been offline since you shut down the Pentagon system. But it still exists. Still functional. Still capable of coordinating operations like the one you just stopped. Where? That's the question, isn't it? Kozlov stood, preparing to be led back to his cell. Consider it a challenge, Mr. Mason. Find my last processor. Prove you're as clever as I think you are. Because if you can't find it, eventually someone else will. And they might have more ambitious plans than I did. He hung up the phone and walked away, leaving Chandler staring after him. Epilogue. 6 months later, Chandler Mason stood in front of a wall-sized display showing a global network map. Traces of data flowing through 1,000 systems, patterns within patterns, the digital fingerprints of both legitimate operations and potential threats. It was 2 a.m. and he was the only one in the operations center. This had become his routine, late-night shifts when the building was quiet and he could think. Patterson called it obsessive. Director Carmichael called it dedicated. Chandler called it necessary. He still hadn't found Kozlov's third quantum processor. 6 months of searching, 6 months of analyzing every anomaly, every unusual pattern, every suspicious piece of code. Nothing. It was out there somewhere. He knew it. Kozlov wouldn't have lied about something like that. It wasn't his style. The challenge was real. You're here late again. Chandler turned. A woman stood in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was about his age, with dark hair and sharp eyes that suggested she didn't miss much. And you are? Chandler asked. Dr. Sarah Rivera. James Rivera's sister. I just got transferred here from Cyber Command. She walked over and handed him one of the coffee cups. I've heard a lot about you. The man who stopped Zero Day single-handedly. It wasn't single-handedly. I had a lot of help. That's not what the classified reports say. But don't worry, I'm not here to fan your ego. I'm here because I found something weird in the network traffic and my brother said you're the guy to talk to when things get weird. What kind of weird? Sarah pulled out a tablet and showed him a data pattern. Chandler leaned forward, studying it. It looked familiar. Very familiar. That's a routing anomaly, he said slowly. Similar to the one I found when I first started here. Similar but not identical. The pattern is more sophisticated, more subtle, like someone learned from the first attempt and made improvements. Chandler's pulse quickened. How long has this been active? 3 days that I can confirm. Possibly longer before I noticed it. We need to trace it, map its origin, analyze its behavior, understand what it's doing. I was hoping you'd say that. Sarah pulled up a chair. I've already started the preliminary analysis. Want to see what I found? Absolutely. As Sarah began walking him through her findings, Chandler felt the familiar rush of a puzzle unfolding before him. A new challenge. A new pattern to decode. Maybe Kozlov's third processor. Maybe something else entirely. Either way, he was ready. Because this was what he did now. This was who he was. Not just an entry-level technician who got lucky, but an analyst who saw connections others missed. A guardian who stood between the world and the people who wanted to break it. And somewhere out there, hidden in the vast digital infrastructure of the modern world, threats were lurking. Plans were being laid. Countdowns were ticking toward zero. But Chandler Mason was watching, and he wasn't going to miss the next one. The END author's note. This epic action thriller follows Chandler Mason's transformation from entry-level technician to the analyst who prevented global catastrophe. While this opening section establishes the characters, stakes, and explosive action, a full 90,000-word novel would continue with additional plots including the hunt for Kozlov's third quantum processor, Sarah Chen's integration into the team and her own hidden connection to the zero-day network, the revelation that some captured sleeper agents are actually double agents working for U.S. intelligence, international complications as other nations discover their own embedded sleeper cells, and a climactic finale where Chandler must prevent an even more sophisticated attack that makes Zero Day look like a practice run. The complete novel would expand on the themes of trust, the cost of security, and what it means to protect a world that doesn't always want protecting.